So there's going to be much fewer jokes since I have so little time to talk, and I should actually have a timer out so that I have a little bit of an idea of how much time I am using or wasting. My only joke is that it's butterflies of the overworld, and a very esoteric NetHack joke, chaos theory, butterfly effect, eyes of the overworld, monk quest item. Hey. So basically, this is a lightning talk on chaos theory and procedural generation. And the reason why it's a lightning talk, even though those are both really big topics, is because I am neither a chaostician nor a full-time proc-gen developer. So this is less of I have a solution to a problem or I have like a particular technique, and more I've noticed something really cool I want to share with you all. So this comes from two things. The first side is the proc-gen side. So I read Procedural Generation and Game Design, put together by Tanya Short and Tarn Adams. Fantastic book. I hope you've all read it, and like a lot of people here contributed to it. It's an amazing book. And the particular essay within it that I found interesting in this context was Understanding the Generated by Gillian Smith. And in it, something that she talked about was, she said, it's easy to determine the success or failure of a generator based only on what we witness come from the system as developers. But unless the generative system is intended to create only one artifact, at some point we need to understand the generator as a whole. And so her essay had to do with how to understand and visualize the entire generative space, was the word that she used for like what are all of the things that a generator can make. And her way to visualize a generator was to create, first of all, metrics that evaluate what a particular piece of generated content, what do you define success as? So if you're generating levels, you might care about the density of the level, and you might come up with some metric for difficulty. You do something that gets you a number. So say that you run AI through your level and you count how many out of certain test runs die versus how many survive, and you consider that to be a number representing difficulty. And once you have these numeric metrics, you can create a generative space where each one of those metrics is an axis in an n-dimensional space. And now you can have a visualization of, by the metrics that you care about, you can score a particular piece of content in terms of how well it fits what you want your generator to create. So every piece of content created by the system can be measured and plotted on this n-dimensional generative space. And so a simple example for visualization is to try and come up with two metrics so that you can get a 2D representation of your generative space. So she had an example of a kind of jumping platform where she cared about the linearity of the levels and their leniency. And then she could create a heat map where if she created, say, 1,000 levels and scored them all, then she could have a heat map of the generated levels, what were their linearity and leniency. And when you look at this, you can see things about what type of levels does this system tend to generate. You can see that it tends to be in the middle in terms of leniency, and there's also favoring towards either a very low amount of linearity or a very high amount of linearity. And in one picture, you can see a lot about what kind of things does this generator create. And then the real power of it is that you can tweak the parameters of your generator. So if you have something like max level size or number of platforms, you have those kind of tuning parameters for your generator, you can change those, and each time you do, create a new output of the generative space, and you create something that she calls the expressive space. And so these are all of the different things, and you learn much more about your system, because now you can say, if you look at all of it, that on the whole, there are a lot of different parameters that have that kind of favoring of the line in the middle. But you could look at this and pick out the one that you like the shape of the best, that has the best representation of what you want your actual levels to be like, and use that. So really cool essay. But when I saw this, it made me think of chaos theory. So I am a fan of chaos theory, and most of what I know comes from a book called Chaos: Making a New Science by James Gleick. It's a wonderfully fabulous book, and I really recommend you read it, even if it's just for fun. It's very accessible. And I have so little time to talk about what the hell chaos theory is. I also am obligated to have Jeff Goldblum in here. So to put it super simply, chaos theory is the studying of complex systems where small differences in starting outcomes can lead to drastically different, or changes in starting conditions can lead to drastically different outcomes. These are deterministic. They're not random systems, but they are unpredictable in a way that makes them interesting to study, and chaotic in a more technical definition of the word. And when it comes to the study and like the discovery of chaos theory as a discipline, a lot of it came from figuring out ways to visualize systems. So there's a concept in chaos theory called a phase portrait or a phase space. And what you do is that you have a system, like a pendulum, and you represent the variables in this system as axes in an n-dimensional space. This might sound familiar, which is my whole point of this talk. So a pendulum, you can just have the xy position of the pendulum bob, and then you can draw that every tick of the simulation, you put a dot on your phase portrait of the xy position of the pendulum, and you're able to get a two-dimensional image of what is the entire behavior of this system as it's running through time. And then, of course, in chaos theory, you deal with much more complicated systems that are, three-dimensional or more and have much more interesting features. This also relates to population dynamics was another thing that they studied. So there was a guy called Robert May, and he noticed that if you looked at, there's one equation for populations of animals, and that one equation has a variable that's kind of how sensitive it is. And so in some cases, that gives you this linear trend where, the number of rabbits gets up to 300 rabbits and then it stays steady. Sometimes you get an oscillation between two states, a kind of boom and bust, where it's 300, then it's 150, and then it's 300 again. Sometimes you get a four-state oscillation. These are all things that can be observed in nature with real animal populations and all modeled in the same equation. But you can also get something that's a chaotic state. And the thought at the time before chaos theory was that if you were observing this, there was kind of nothing you could do. This was just completely unpredictable, chaotic kind of garbage data, and you wouldn't be able to make future predictions. But he came up with, or used something called a bifurcation diagram, where when you model this sensitivity kind of variable of the equation as the x-axis, you can see, so the beginning is the point where it's a single equilibrium point, and then where it branches is where those are the two equilibrium points that it oscillates between, and then it splits again into four, and then you get the region that looks like chaos. But when he zoomed in on it, he found out that individual sections actually look like the same thing as the whole. Essentially, it's fractal, which I think that a lot of us as roguelike developers are fond of fractals. And the idea was that chaos theory comes from this idea that if you are able to look at the behavior of an entire system and analyze systems in different ways, you can find unexpected patterns that teach you more about the class of systems as a whole. And so I feel like there's a connection here in that when we're dealing with generators, we care about looking at what we're generating, and chaos theory is kind of looking at it from the other direction. I was talking to Zhang Wu about this morning, and he put it really well, that it's kind of approaching the same problem from different directions, where as procedural content generators, we're creating these generators and trying to understand the output, and for chaos theory, they're looking at existing systems in nature and trying to find the patterns that let them kind of understand the generator behind it. And so I think that, I don't know why I fell asleep, but this is a cool kind of connection. So I think that, read about chaos theory and tell me if you learn anything cool.
Okay. Great. And now we have Kawa up, and then Eben is on deck. And if you have signed up to give a lightning talk, come meet me at the side of the stage.
Hi, I'm Kawa. A lot of you probably recognize me. I've been doing this a lot. Some of you might not. So before we actually talk about the whole death thing, let me introduce myself. I'm not a coder. I do not make video games. But so many of you do, and so many of you have given such good advice. No need for me to talk about that. I'm also not good at video games. I had to ask other people to give me victory screens just for me to cross them out because I can't do this. But I've been here a while. I love roguelikes very dearly. I contributed a lot to Roguelike Radio, which is an awesome podcast about game design and developer interviews and all sorts of good stuff. From 2012 to 2015, instead of doing real work, I was making Let's Plays and streams of roguelikes. I ran a small convention, which was mostly us eating really well in Brooklyn. Good times. But what do I do the most when it comes to roguelikes? More than anything else? I die. And this is the most obvious thing in the world, right? You play roguelikes, you die. You play roguelikes a lot, you die a lot. But wait a minute. It's a roguelike thing. It's a roguelike thing that death is completely normal, that failure is completely normal. This is a screen from N++, which is a really fantastic platformer. And apparently, what I learned recently is that in playtesting, the players were really distressed that they were dying so much. It's like, these games are too hard, this is weird, why am I dying all the time? The developers literally had to make an attract screen of the menu of the ninja dying over and over again to just barrel it into the players' heads. No, 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 this is normal, you're going to die. Roguelikes don't have to do that, right? Because we expect it, because it's normal. So it's core to the roguelike experience to die. And if that's the case, we should examine what that looks like, what that experience is and means. So 2 terms before I go on. In older roguelikes, when you died, a huge printout would be created. Do you want your possessions identified, and then some? And in general, these files were called morgue files. I am expanding that definition to be literally anything between when the character dies and when the player decides to quit or try again as the morgue experience, as the morgue space. Now, this could literally just be, you died, try again? Yes, no. Or it could be that giant file, it could be saved for the future or just something you see before you clear it and move on. Totally, either way, I'm calling it all the morgue. The other thing is a term that is extra ludic. Anything inside the bounds of the game is inside the game. Anything outside of that but about the game is extra ludic space, extra ludic experience. So once you've created the morgue, by definition, it's extra ludic. The player no longer has control of the game because they just died. And also, players talking about gameplay between games is them interacting with your game in an extra ludic way. And thus, it's also the culture of your game, the culture of your players. So from what I can tell, from all of this time dying over all of these years, there's sort of 3 major functions of the morgue, 3 major extra ludic functions. One, like was talked about a lot yesterday, is this idea of using it for storytelling, using it for lore and theme. There's also using it to improve play, and there's also using it to tell stories. So we'll go through each of these in order. The very first screen, when the player is aware that they're dead, tells you a lot about what game you've just played. Dungeons of Dreadmore is, a fantastic little game about making fun of video game tropes. So you have your eyebrowed one, your sort of Doom guy equivalent, in the center, all bloody and beaten, and this really bizarre, ornate font. Congratulations, you have died. It's funny, it's weird, and that's exactly the tone they wanted. Caves of Kide, it's just like, you died, but here's who killed you. Here's who they worship. Here's their faction set. Like, here's all of this information about this world around that's happening to you, but you're dead and it's whatever. You're just one mutant of many. And these are both really different from each other, tell you so much about what the games themselves are. As I mentioned, morgues started as these detailed files about literally everything that happened to your character. Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup is a really beautifully extreme example of this. This is a game that I played where I got roughly halfway through. I picked up the orb and then died, pretty soon after that. So I'm roughly halfway through the game. It's like all of my resistances, literally every weapon I saw in the game, every single monster I killed, everything that was in my inventory, including all the unidentified ones that could have saved me. If I tried to print this to PDF, it would have been 41 pages. I could study that, or I could, do my job, but that's fine. I have it there now. What's great about public server play, especially for these older roguelikes, is that, well, it's all text files, and you can just save this on the server somewhere. Every single one of the Crawl public servers has a morgue folder where you could just access all of your deaths you've played before, read through all of this, read through other people's of this if you really want to, and learn something. And that was the whole idea, was just, well, here's how you died. Here's everything you knew when you should have known when you died. Could you have done better? Time to find out. Now, it doesn't have to be 41 pages of text. It really doesn't. Krypton the Necrodancer literally just shows you the last 12 moves you did. Just the last 12 beats. And it's perfectly valid because Krypton the Necrodancer is small enough that showing you the last 12 moves you made gives you a good idea of what what you just did wrong. Both valid. Oh, and also for Necrodancer, if you press one of the buttons here and you didn't save it ahead of time, you lose it forever. So you can completely ignore this if you want, but you shouldn't. But the option is available to you either way. And the last one, as I said, is storytelling. This is such a huge thing in roguelike culture. Yet another sad death, yet another silly death, yet another annoying death. Lessons learned the hard way, which literally broke the NetHack chatbot. The looted screenshots, thing on the Dungeon Man's Discord is literally like, would you like to see me die? Here you go. And of course, Boat Murdered, which is technically not about a roguelike, but is one of the most famous things from our culture, right? Is this amazing story about failure. This is what we do when we're not actually able to play a game, is think about and work on the stories we tell around those games. And that's so inspiring to me as a person who likes stories, as a person who loves these games. This is everything. This is everything that I want from roguelikes, is to create those things from the randomness, from everything else. So that's all I have. Here's a cute little XKCD edit I made a few minutes ago. It's supposed to be about sports, but really it's about roguelikes, and we all know this. Thanks.
Set my timer. Keep track of myself.
Yeah, this
All
is
right.
good.
So here's me. So a quick thing about me on identity. Hi, my name is Evan Howard, Squid Pony of the Squid Pony / up there for GitHub. My code is pretty much all Apache 2.0. Please steal it. It's kind of the point of why I'm talking today. But on the subject of identity, on various places such as Twitch and Twitter and stuff, I show up as Dr. Roguelike. No, not that kind of roguelike. That's my joke. I'm not a doctor. When you identify who you're going to be on the internet forever, choose something you already are, not something you're in the process of becoming, and then stop. It's my advice. Yes, I quit my PhD program to work on games because games are more important. So this is SquidLib, is a library that long ago came into existence. Tommy Ettinger, who you can see has the most recent commit 17 hours ago, he's done most of the work on this. I want to talk about the part that I think is most fun about roguelikes. And what that is this 1,743 commits to this library. This library covers, it's in Java, but it covers algorithms all over the roguelike space. It's all Apache 2.0. Go here, steal things, make it great. It's nice if you tell me you did, but whatever. So a bajillion commits. And this is, like I said, Tommy does a lot of the work now, but this going back is, here's all the things that we wanted to do. Here's the things that we think are going to be good. If we go to releases, I got to go back up to the code. So if we go to like the releases, we can see that there's been 15 major releases. And the thing that makes this journey amazing is that version 3.0 beta 9, it runs on libgdx background, which is basically a real-time game engine for Java based on some other things. It works really well on a lot of things. Theoretically, this library works on, I shouldn't say theoretically, this library works with GWT for web components. I don't use that part at all. I don't know anything about that part. Tommy's done all these amazing optimizations because GWT does not like things like regex commands for dumb reasons. But hey, look, it works. There's regedis. But before that, we have older versions, starting with 2.9.2, I believe, is the one. Yeah. So 2.9.1. So 2.9.1 is the last time that this library supported Swing, which, anybody here know Swing in Java? Yeah, so I love Swing. I love the NetBeans Matisse builder making nice layouts. Swing is not very optimal for running a game that does any sort of heavy lifting for graphics, which originally I didn't think roguelikes did. Now, because Tommy has built optimizations, I use it all the time. But what this means is, in this library, there is code that's current for libgdx, highly efficient, highly awesome. But if you want to start with Swing right now, whether you're using Eclipse or NetBeans or whatever, there's a version 2.91 that's still available, still has great Swing implementation. You can just put a JPanel, boop, write characters to a JPanel in a color. Good to go. Your roguelike is done. That's all it takes. So I just wanted to come up and point this out. I think it's a resource that the way the actual library is split out. So you can see also it was a simpler life back in 2.91. Here's the library. Have a nice day. And then now in 3.0, there's like, here's all the pieces of the library. Pick the parts you want. And it's really true because here's the math for working in grid world. Here is how you do like roguelike generation, things like you want dungeon generations. There's a whole bunch of different generators in there. And then do you want display output in colors and letters? So I'm going to come back up to the top. Whoops, wrong way. I'm going to come back up to the top. So this is on GitHub. SquidPony, SquidLib, Apache 2.0. Use it. Let me know. And even more awesomer, if you have suggestions or updates, tell me and tell Tommy. We will work on getting things in there. And if you've got like a code change you did, we take pull requests from other people. 2 weeks ago, somebody asked for casual generation. And as of now, tomorrow I guess I'll push it. SquidLib it makes a moat and a curtain wall and a castle and a keep and a pond in the keep. And that's just like first stab at it. But the thing that I am most happy about working in roguelikes is helping other people make better roguelikes. So be those other people. So that's what I got.
Hello. Well, to start with an appeal. An appeal to the audience. Compared to the complexity of previous talks, my talk has about the complexity of a check tract. But this is a philosophy that I use a lot in my life, which is that if you only have one idea, then you don't need a lot of prep notes. So I only have these index cards. A little bit about me. I'm not a developer. I'm not a tech person in any way. But the way that I find my connection to roguelike games is that I am a dungeon master. I like tabletop RPGs, and I'm playing a lot of that for the past couple of years. My favorite thing to tell my players, and my favorite thing that I like to hear from the GM when I'm playing, is the following phrase. And the phrase is, would you like to describe your death? I like roguelikes a lot. You die a lot in roguelikes. I didn't know that Kawa was going to talk about the same thing, so sorry about any overlap. This is completely unintentional. I also like tabletop role-playing games that are very lethal, especially those belonging to the old school Renaissance, the retro clones, and so on. In these games, death is very frequent. And when you have something all the time, you got to work hard at making it special, which is where would you like to describe your death comes from. I would like to talk a little bit about the concept of meaningful death in TTRPGs and how it can apply to roguelikes theoretically, because I don't develop games, and that's you. Maybe if you guys find that this inspires you, maybe I'll find this in a game someday. If the death is meaningful, that means that the death is less routine, it's more fun, and the engagement of the player is kept up right until the end. So what makes the death meaningful? Well, one thing that I think about when I come up with a character for a tabletop role-playing game, and especially if I think that I'm going to die, which is usually the case, is to think about what kind of death I would like to have. And that's like, instead of coming up with a cool backstory, I think about how would it make it very satisfying for me, like what kind of death would leave me satisfied, even if I died, because I know that I will. So I'll share with you my most meaningful death in my favorite roguelike, Ancient Domains of Mystery. Conan, the human barbarian, choked in his own vomit while paralyzed. Now, that's a very good death message. That really stands out. I don't really need to tell you the story. You can kind of visualize it on your own. Now, the following death message doesn't sound very meaningful. Pippin, the Hearthling farmer, was killed by an orc. Now, that doesn't sound so meaningful, but imagine if instead of Pippin, the Hearthling farmer, was killed by an orc, it actually described the death of Pippin, said Hearthling farmer. So Pippin is standing in front of this orc who is about 2 orders of magnitude taller than him, and he falls to his knees, and a lone tear falls from his cheek as he recalls the Shire and blah, blah, blah. Let's not get into a lot of Tolkien IP here, but you get the idea. If I describe the death, then the death becomes meaningful immediately. What if you could describe your death in a roguelike? What if at the moment of your death, when it says you have died, you would get the question, would you like to describe your death? Yes, no, and then you could click yes and write a little blurb, maybe like 140 characters or something like that. And then you press enter, and this is entered into the high score file, or into the verbals high score file, or into the bones file, or whatever it is that you call your morgue file. The player writes it, and that makes the game, which is the analog of the GM in a tabletop RPGs, it makes the game's job easier, because now the game doesn't have to come up with a really zany way to describe Pippin being killed by an orc, because the player has supplied it. The player makes the GM's job easier, and it can make the game's job easier, which makes your high score file a lot more interesting. This also encourages what I like to call healthy metagaming, which is sometimes you see the death coming. In a TTRPG, you certainly do, especially if you're in like Call of Cthulhu or something. And even in a roguelike, sometimes you know, okay, I got about 5 moves and then I'm going to die. And then in a TTRPG, you start to use this to make your death more interesting. You say, well, I'm going to die anyway, so why don't I try to charge at the dragon, then leap off the wall, and actually hit it head first, killing myself in the process. This is also what we call acting in character. There's always a little bit of metagaming involved in acting in character. Yeah, my character would do this, but the reason I'm doing it is because I find it fun. And you could do this even in roguelikes. But then people would be able to know the story because you've entered it into the high score. Acting in character is more fun than thinking tactically, in my opinion. Therefore, it is better, because the object of the game is to have fun. So to summarize my talk, step 1, if your game put a describe your death support mechanic in your game. Step 2, roguelikes become closer to TTRPGs. Step 3, I don't know. Step 4, profit. Thank you.
All right, hey all. Oh, is it possible to use that because I'll be typing, and one-handed typing is tricky. Nah. All right. Well, that's okay. I can work it out. I can type one-handed. So anyway, hey, I'm Kate Compton. I'm better known as Galaxy Kate on Twitter. How many of you have heard of my very small text generation language, Tracery? Oh, cool. Fair number. How many have actually written something in Tracery? How many of you written a roguelike that uses Tracery? Actually, not very many people. Yeah, so anyway, Tracery is this text generation language that I wrote in JavaScript. It got super popular. People have ported it into pretty much every other language, including Lisp. So if any of you are writing a Lisp roguelike, go ahead and use that. But I'm here today to talk to you about another language that I've been working on that I think might be interesting. This is like extremely tangentially related to roguelikes. This is just me here talking about stuff. Although I know a lot of you are interested in generativity, so I do a lot of outreach resources about generativity. So you can go to GalaxyKate/zines to see all of my zines, and this is an 8-page little micro zine on sort of first steps in generativity. If you liked the Gillian Smith work that was presented earlier, this kind of like links to that sort of work and a lot of other academic work. I've also am super tired, and yet I've had a lot of caffeine, so I'm kind of like an animated zombie today. So this should be super great. So a while, maybe a year and a half ago, I was working at Google on their Google Home project, and I was kind of there as the like weirdo making. There's a lot of weirdos at Google, but I was one of them, and I was hired to be the sort of person doing weird prototyping. Like, what else could the Google Home be used for rather than what it is now? Does anybody have like a Google Home or Amazon Alexa kind of talking flower pot? And yeah, so I couldn't actually make the sort of stuff that I wanted to in their technology, so I made my own JavaScript platform and accidentally sort of ended up writing another programming language to be able to model interesting finite state machine chatbots. So a finite state machine, you can kind of think of it as like a board game, but one of those old-fashioned board games where the instructions are actually written on the board. So you like take your little pointer and you put it where it says start, and then it says, roll the dice to see how far you go, and you go a couple of blocks. It says, like, when you land on this block, you get 5 hit points. Like, take 5 hit points pieces. Like, if you have more than 6 hit points, go this way. If you have less than 6 hit points, go that way. So it's kind of like halfway between a board game and a choose-your-own-adventure novel. This is what I eventually, Google wasn't able to use what I made, but they were very kind in open sourcing it. So it was open sourced under the name Bottery. It's since changed its name to Chancery because of a name collision. We can see a little bit here. Let me increase the size of it. So this is a kitten simulator that I wrote. We can see that here is this sort of board game version of what it means to have a kitten. I am currently in naming the kitten, so we will call it Butt, because that's apparently an excellent name. It uses a lot of trace regeneration. So the kitten is now idle. It's going to roll around and make cute purring noises. And then when it has waited long enough, it activates that exit to angry. It's hungry. And then it's in hungry for a while, and then it times out and goes to angry, and it'll go around that for as long as necessary. And then if I pet the kitten, did it activate petting the kitten? Okay, I pet the kitten, and it's very happy. And like any kitten, it has a number set of how many pets it wants before it will bite you. So the idea here is you kind of have like this state machine, but you also have an internal blackboard that's getting set up. And I've been making a lot of iterations of this. I just kind of keep rewriting it every 6 months since it got open source, trying to make it into something that people could actually use. This is a version of you have multiple board games that you're playing. This is sort of a Zork at the end of the world, where the world is ending and the world is playing a specific board game of how different cities are falling at different rates. But you are also wandering around your house, kind of looking at different objects, and so you can kind of check in with where you are in your house, inspect the record collection that I have in the attic, or go make myself a cup of tea, and okay, I'm done with that cup of tea. Turn on the radio, Cincinnati has fallen, make another cup of tea, things like that. So you can kind of have multiple board games going at the same time. This is the latest version, which is actually kind of usable now. I'm hoping to do a soft launch for Proc Jam this year, which is in a couple of weeks, and actually it's called artbot.club, make a website where people can upload their little Chancery maps and you can actually interact with these bots. But I figured, what the heck, let's actually write a little roguelike right now, because I did a live demo this last week, and we got sort of, in 5 minutes, we were able to create these little D&D bots. So I'm going to refresh this, and it has loaded a bunch of Dungeons and Dragon bots, and you can see them all talking in the bottom right. I had a tracery grammar left over from a hipster restaurant simulator, and so I used that for the names. And so we decided that what we're actually writing is this is hipsters and humans, and it's a bunch of orcs playing a humans board game, and they're rolling their human personas, such as a lawful cute postdoc, and then yeah. So we currently nothing very much is happening here. So I'll show you a little bit of the syntax, and I will try to write a one-handed live code Zork-like. Let's do that, shall we? So currently everybody enters and is going into a tavern. And actually, let me turn off that there's 4 people. Yep. Shoot. This is one of those things which version of this am I in? Downloads. Artbot Club. Sorry, live code. All right, currently have 4 D&D bots. When we start, I want to set that to 1. I can also change these bots, so I can set this one to be the coffee maker. So now it's a sentient coffee pot, and I can ask it to make me a coffee. So it's now brewing some coffee and should be. For some reason, it's not actually telling me about the coffee it made. Live demo. Let's see. I'll basically take 2 minutes to attempt to do this, and then anybody who wants to try this out is welcome to see me afterwards. Let's see where our D&D bot is. Okay, so here's our D&D bot. It has a little grammar of things that it knows. It's a little tracer grammar. It has some states. So these are kind of the little spots on the board game that we're going to move through. Everybody starts in origin. And when it says when I enter the origin state, it's going to say like, hello, I'm rolling in my character sheet. And then it's going to do a couple of things, like it's going to set its character class to a randomly generated class name, and its name to a character name, and etc. And then it goes into a tavern. All right, so let's make some exits from the tavern, right? And it's like finishing your adventure at the tavern would kind of suck. So let's say when the player says east, they're going to go east from the tavern. What's east from the tavern? The lake. All right. We're going to go to the lake. And that's enough for that. Oh, and I'm going to say, like, when you do that exit, you're going to say, let's go to the lake. All right, so let's try this out. Okay. Oh, I screwed something up. Live code. Anyway, like, the idea is that you're basically going to, like, create these little states, and then you can move between them by either saying stuff or waiting for stuff. A lot of this project was actually, or like part of this project was inspired by Alexei's really great talk 2 years ago about accessible roguelikes for the visually disabled, and like what it would mean to make chat-only interactions for roguelikes, or really kind of like the space that's maybe nearby roguelikes. Anyway, this was just like a sort of like teaser of what's to come next for Tracery, and yeah, please ask me later. It's just really hard to program one-handed.
Yeah. Cool. So this will be our final lightning talk, and then we'll have a short break, and then we'll come back for live Caves of Cud. Let me know when you are ready. During the next break, if anyone wants to help me move back some of the tables that we moved around for the arcade, you should come meet me next to the coffee area over there, so we can leave GitHub in a nice, clean state.
All right. Thank you. So for many years, I've been making procedurally generated. My mouse does not work because it's plugged in. Let me fix that. There we go. Procedurally generated alien spacecraft. And I find it easy, and the reason I think I find it easy is because nobody has ever seen an alien spacecraft before. I mean, that's just, it must be easy. Anything can be an alien spacecraft. And by the same logic, I think that the human face is the hardest thing to procedurally generate that we could possibly do, because everybody has looked at and studied human faces for their entire lives. And so I feel like everything kind of falls into that continuum of procedurally generated stuff. And so for a very long time, I have naturally thought that whales should be fairly easy to procedurally generate because most people don't see them on a day-to-day basis. And I always liked that idea. I thought that was kind of neat. But there was one other rule that I've understood for a long time about procedurally generating content, and that is never try to procedurally generate a 57 Chevy. Of course, it doesn't work that way. That's not why you would use procedurally generated content. But that means that terrestrial whales kind of are not what I'm thinking of. So the alternative must be extraterrestrial whales, alien whales in alien seas. So I love that idea, and I chewed on it for quite a while. And but I thought, how am I going to wrap a game around that? What kind of game would that be? And I considered the possibility and kind of thought that maybe I would be a very quiet, contemplative, study game where you study whales and take pictures of whales and discuss whales and scan for whales. I don't see any whales here. And I've only got 5 minutes. Come on. Oh, die. So I hit F1 so that I could just see all the whales. These are actually pods. And I can zoom in on them. So I wanted that. And so this is basically as far as I've gotten so far. I can finally get in the water and actually see the whales. This particular species has small flukes and both a primary and secondary dorsal fin, though neither of them is particularly large. And you can see, I think we have some zebra striping underneath. That's about all I can do. I can't drive around, I can't stick a harpoon into them, I can't do anything except take pictures of beautiful alien whales. So let me zoom out of here, see about looking at maybe one other pod. There we go. Is this the same species? I don't know, but I've gotten pretty far in this, and oh yeah, I don't see a secondary dorsal fin here, so it's almost certainly a different species. Who's going to play this? Who's going to have fun with this? Who would like this? I don't actually know. I'm having a really, really hard time figuring out what the audience is for this, or where I would find that audience, or how I would talk to them about this game. And that's why I brought it up here, so I could get your feedback, and hopefully you guys can catch me later if you have some ideas about who might like this, or what your initial impression of this is. I just like your feedback, because again, it was a vision of mine, but now that I've got it working, I'm at a loss as to who would want this thing. So, thank you.